O'clock. I'd also like to ask you as a courtesy to all that you silence your cell phones and mute your connection if you joined us on Teams. Each director received notice of this committee meeting. The public meeting notice was properly posted as required by law. Directors, for the attendance record, when your name is called, please unmute yourself and let us know that you're here. Christy or Lisa, please call each committee member to record attendance.
Chairman Huber.
Here.
Director Rankin.
Here.
Director Boren. Director Crone.
Here.
Director Sanderson. Presiding Officer Flores.
Good morning. I'm here.
Director Tallis.
Here.
Director Taylor.
Here. Do we have a quorum with 2 missing so far? We have 3 committee members here.
And the officers will count toward the calculation of the quorum.
Okay, so we do have a quorum then of the committee present. We'll now move to the public comments section of the agenda. For those commenting, please note the committee may not deliberate items that are not posted on our agenda. Additionally, we do not plan to place a time limit on public comment unless we feel the time being taken is affecting others' ability to address the committee. At this time, we have no one signed up to speak. Is there anyone out there who did not sign up that wishes to address the committee? If so, please state your name and proceed with your comments. Now we will proceed to the regular agenda, seeing as there's no one to comment. Agenda item number 1, report on possible discussion on fiscal year ended 2020 comprehensive annual financial report by David Thompson, Chief Financial Officer. David?
Good morning, everyone. We have Aaron Wortham, from the partner in charge from Baker Tilly, that is going to give his report of the audit. And what I'd like to do is turn it over to Aaron, and then I'll click through his slides. If everybody can see the slides, we'll get moving.
Sounds great. Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Aaron Worthman, partner on the audit engagement. I also have Sarah Slaughter, who is the senior manager on the audit engagement. And we are pleased to present the fiscal year 2020 audit report. Next slide, please. Can we scroll to the next slide?
Oh, can you see the slide?
I can see it, but it didn't scroll through.
Let's see. Am I not showing the slides? I'm on page.
You need to go to slideshow, David.
Oh, okay. Got it here. Let's try it again here.
There we go.
Now I can see. Okay, sorry.
No, that's okay. So what I want to do is I want to go through what exactly was covered by this year's audit engagement. Go through our required communications with the governing body. What are the items you received in addition to the financial statements? You would have received our required communication letter. That format is significantly different this year. So if you haven't taken a look at that, I'd urge you at some point in time to read through that. There's a lot of great information. Unfortunately, a lot of which I will not be able to cover through this presentation, but as an aside, please be sure to check that out. I then want to touch on the impact of future auditing standards that we've talked to with management, and then open it up for discussion. Next slide. So if we were to take a step back and look at this year's audit, I'd say it's obviously very unique. We were in a COVID environment pretty much for the entire year. Our audit was conducted 100% remotely. And in fact, our firm and probably most accounting firms have been conducting all audits 100% remotely since the beginning of March. So that was done this year as well. In addition to that, you also had a system upgrade, and you also had a major accounting implementation, which was relative to GASB 84, which is accounting guidance related to fiduciary funds and reporting those separately, those fiduciary funds separately within your financial statements. So if you take a look at your financials, you'll now see separate statements for your retirement plan and your 401k plan at the front of your financial statements. So it was a busy year. It was a unique year, but I will say, even with all that going on, I thought the audit went very well. The audit went very smoothly. Again, as always, management is very cooperative. They get us all the information requests timely. I will say one thing, I'd say over the last probably 3 or 4 years or so, as our Austin office has continued to grow, we've picked up a number of utility clients in Texas. And I will say, definitely this entity is one of the best audits that we have in terms of management preparedness. We have very few findings or recommendation. Overall, we've been extremely pleased with how this has gone. And even with a COVID year, this year's no exception. Next slide, please. So if we take a look at this year's audit, again, our fieldwork occurred during October 19th through 30th, and I use that term loosely. When we take a look at the audit, I'd say about 30% of what we do has to do with internal controls and the testing in those internal controls. So what we'll do is we'll take a look at all your major processes, whether it's your work orders, your disbursements, your billing, things like that. We'll take a look at those processes. We'll document what should your major controls be in each of those processes. We'll then test those controls for effectiveness. Additional things that we do as part of that process, we'll take a significant look at your information technology. Not surprisingly, most of your internal control structure is somehow tied to information technology. So much so, in fact, that when we test those controls and information technology controls, we bring a certified information systems auditor on site that functions as part of our audit group. But again, most of that is taking a look at those major processes. We'll also conduct fraud risk audits, where we'll reach out to certain individuals throughout the organization to get their thoughts on fraud and fraud risks. But that's about 30% of what we do. Next slide. Then 40% of what we do is specific to substantive tests. That would be taking a look at your cash and investments, reaching out to those parties for confirmations of those balances. It'd be looking at your fixed assets, additions, your retirements. I'd be taking a look at specialist reports. So when it comes to your net pension liability, we'll rely on those actuaries to come up with those liabilities. For your arbitrage liabilities, we'll rely on arbitrage specialists to come up with those numbers. But that's 40% we do, 40% of what we do, basically the nuts and bolts of accounting, if you will. And then the last 30% of what we do is taking a look at your comprehensive annual financial report and testing those disclosures and making sure that everything's adequately reported, and then planning. So that's the remaining 30%. But that gives you a little bit of insight, high level, into what we do as part of the audit process. Next slide. Initially when I talked about these control policies and procedures, I think it's also important to know what are the specific areas of emphasis when we go through your audit. And not surprisingly, capital assets. It makes up most of your balance sheet. So again, a lot of the testing we do is relative to those capital assets. Take a look at the cash and investments, again, your billing, your payroll, your disbursements. And last but not least, again, information technology. And I would say, as we go forward year to year, I will say information technology and testing around that environment will probably take on an even greater importance as we go forward. Next slide. Your audit was performed in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards. Those are the rules assigned by the profession that we need to follow when we conduct your audit. In addition, we also have to conduct your audit in conformance with government auditing standards. Those are additional standards relative to the continuing professional education of your audit team, our independence, the supervision of the audit team, our quality control due care. So again, just a couple additional requirements that we as your audit team need to follow. So our audit objective is to obtain reasonable assurance that your financial statements are free from material misstatement. At the end of this year's audit, your financial statements have received an unmodified opinion, which is also known as a clean opinion, which is the highest level of assurance that we can provide as auditors. Now, one thing I want to note, we do provide an opinion on your financial statements. However, during an audit, auditors do not provide an opinion on internal control. However, when we identify internal control deficiencies, especially those that are material weaknesses or significant deficiencies, we're required to communicate those to you. So part of what we have to do, part of our audit is when we find control deficiencies, we have to categorize those in severity. The most severe being a material weakness. And basically a material weakness is any control breakdown that would lead to more than a reasonable possibility that a material misstatement could result in your financial statements. Again, that's the most severe. And pleased to report, we did not identify any material weaknesses as part of this year's audit. The next level down, which is less severe than a material weakness, is considered a significant deficiency, which basically that means it's severe enough that it warrants the attention of governance. And we did not have any significant deficiencies. We do have control recommendations, industry best practices. We'll have those almost with any audit. I'd say it's extremely rare for us never to have any sort of industry best practice or minor control deficiencies, especially due to the information technology area, because that's constantly evolving. So we did have a control deficiency, which we've discussed with management team at the end of the audit. Next slide, please. Again, through that communication letter, it discusses a number of things, one of which is the independence, our independence. So I'm here to report that not only our firm, but every individual on your audit is independent in regard to your organization, in fact, and appearance. If we had any significant or unusual transactions that we discovered during the year, we would need to disclose those to you. And just know this would not be the first time you folks would be hearing about that. If we had any unusual transactions or anything really significant or a significant audit finding or concern, I would definitely have those discussions with you because the last thing we want are any surprises to come up in this year-end board discussion or audit committee discussion. Accounting policies. If you take a look at your financial statements, at the beginning of those statements, you'll see all the accounting policies laid out, the significant accounting policies. One of our jobs is to make sure that those policies are in compliance with generally accepted accounting principles. But not only that, we need to make sure that you're following those policies. So those are outlined within the financials. We often get questions by governing bodies and users of financial statements. You know, what are the limitations of these financial statements? If there was a what could go wrong, what areas should we call attention to when we look at those statements? My answer is going to be it always should probably be something relative to a significant estimate. So much so, in fact, that we're required to disclose those significant estimates to you. You'll find those within your letter. But one that I wanted to call attention to, you have two pension liabilities, net pension liabilities, but one that I wanted to call attention to was for the Brazos plan. What we need to do and what your financial statements do is they disclose that liability with the discount rate, which is a significant assumption. Currently, your discount rate is 6.5%. With that 6.5%, your liability is $11.5 million. But one of the required disclosures is we have to do a sensitivity analysis relative to that discount rate. So if we were to increase that discount rate from 6.5% to 7.5%, that liability goes from 11.5 million down to 8.7 million. And likewise, if we reduce that discount rate to 5.5%, that liability then increases to 14.8 million. So as I sit here today, can I tell you that we can tell you with 100% certainty that your liability at year end is 11.5 million for this plan? No, I don't think we can say that. But what I do think we can say is it lets the users know that it is a significant estimate. It is subjective. And to that point, it's probably somewhere between $15 million to $8 million, depending. So again, it lets the reader know that, this is exactly it. It's an estimate. It's not an exact number, but it gives you a feeling for what that number should be. So again, it's important for you as a governing body to be aware that there's certain areas within the financials that do contain some uncertainty, and this would be one of those. But again, no audit findings or concerns. In addition, we did not identify any adjusting journal entries as part of this year's audit. Next slide. So within that letter that I talked about, one of the things that we do is we kind of turn the page and we start planning for next year. If you talk to your management team, they'll probably let you know that, I'd say every year that goes by, the audit becomes more and more of a year-round process. Recently, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board has been extremely busy issuing new accounting guidance and accounting changes. So we've outlined some of these within the letter to management, so we can work with them now to proactively start planning for these and to make sure these are in place during their respective reporting years. One of the bigger ones is going to be leases. We have a leases change that's going to be effective fiscal year 22. Our firm has spent a lot of time working on leases and developing tools and answering questions on, what types of leases do utilities have. But it'll be a pretty significant undertaking. But just know within the next year or two, we'll be working with your management team on those changes. But again, if you'd like any of the details on the upcoming GASBs, we have a nice summary of each of those within your financials. Next slide, please. But again, given this year, it was a trying year. I mean, not certainly just for the organization, but obviously for the audit as well, being a remote environment, the uncertainties and issues that COVID caused. But I was very pleased again with how the audit went, and certainly our first year on the engagement last year, we definitely noted right away that you have a great team. They do a great job, and not surprisingly, this is one of our most efficient audits that we conduct. So we definitely appreciate their help. Thanks to David and his staff, Matt and Melissa. I've talked with my team. They do a super job. So again, we thank everyone for their hard work. And with that, I'll open up to any questions that Sarah and I can answer.
Good morning. This is Presiding Officer Flores. Mr. Worthman, thank you very much for your team coming out to and auditing our staff. And David, to you and your team, thank you very much. Once again, a job well done. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to say I did go through your slides this week and was very impressed with everything, and especially your comments toward our VRA accounting staff and our management, and just how well they handled getting all the information you needed, especially remotely, working remotely, which was very difficult. So anyway, it makes you proud to be a member of this organization that's so well organized and well maintained and well governed. Thanks, Aaron, for your presentation. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Are there any more comments or questions? And Aaron will be presenting a full report to the full board later on this morning. Well, if not, there's no committee action required on this. The full board will be accepting this during the board meeting. So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn this committee meeting.
So move.
Who was that? Ford? Director Taylor. And second?
Judy Crone.
Director Crone. All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, I say no. And we are adjourned with no further business before the committee at, let's see, 8:19 a.m. So thank you all. We'll see you at the meeting at